The following is a presentation of Sertoba Media and Comey Media, Incorporated.
UFL Week 3 action has come and gone. We've got some NFL news and much more, and even breaking news on this special edition of Total Football Talk. Welcome, one and all across the nation and around the world. I welcome you all to episode 33 of Total Football Talk. I'm one of your co-hosts, Drew Willingham, and we are back for another special edition, and we have another special guest returning for another week in a row, the man, myth, and a legend from the student of the game, as well as you can see his work alongside with A7BN Sports, the three-point conversion, the Jaguar Report, and his other podcast, the Duval Diva Jaguar Report. Give it up for my man, Kyle Nash. Welcome back to the show, brother.
Honor, joy, and privilege to do the thing. And, hey, listen, enough messing around. Let's get right into it, Drew.
You know we are ready to rock and roll with the shenanigans. And for Kyle to get us started, I have to give him this.
Acknowledge me.
It doesn't hit quite right. Like, I don't... Yeah, you know, that we're in the early part of the show. We can banter here. You are a fan of the wrestling, as they say. Drew, let me ask you this. And by the way, I have no beef with Cody Rhodes winning the championship and all that in 1,600 days and blah, blah, blah. That's all good. You know, like I said, I am not a wrestling person. I just know a lot of wrestling people. But am I the only person that think that Cody Rhodes looks more like a heel than a lot of other wrestlers out there?
He definitely can play it off. I mean, he's had other characters in the past. We won't go to where they were, but they were definitely heelish in the past. But the man has definitely grown quite a bit in the past 8 years out there in the wrestling scene. But no, I definitely see what you're saying. But now that he's the undisputed WWE champion, I guess we got a new era in professional wrestling. But don't get me started on that, Kyle. We'll have a 2-hour show just on what I think is going on in professional wrestling right now if I get that far on out. But we got a commenter in the house already. Ike is in the house saying, yo, along with football till the end of the year. Hey. Well, I mean, if you get technical, once the UFL season started, then we have CFL that kind of starts towards the end of this season. And then it goes all the way until the NFL season. So we've got UFL, CFL, and NFL all the way until the end of the year. So, Kyle, for those who aren't as excited right now, how do you feel about that? The fact that we're 3 weeks in, but we have football for the remainder of the year.
Listen here, Drew Willingham. I'm going to tell you this, okay? When it comes to whether or not when it comes to the calendar, this show doesn't give a fuck. I got your name.
That was well played in a total
surprise, motherfucker.
We're already ready to rock and roll. Let's go ahead and get this thing started with the opening drive and recap the past weekend in football.
All right, let's go. We got trips, right? At 42, 989 on two. Ready? Ready.
And Kyle, this past weekend in football was definitely another pretty decent one for the UFL, and we'll start this one out with probably the game that was the most lopsided out of all of them, and that is the Birmingham Stallions game with the other team known as the Memphis Showboats. The Birmingham Stallions taking it 33-14. Adrian Martinez, 334 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, along with 5 carries for 44 yards. You know, kind of going away from the 2 quarterback set between him and Matt Corral definitely paid off and paid much dividends for this team in this past weekend, in my opinion. Along with Deion Kane adding 7 receptions for 144 yards. Jay Sternberger, 4 receptions, 73 yards, and a touchdown. Marlon Williams with the one big play with 1 reception for 41 yards and a touchdown. And Ricky Person Jr., 8 carries, only for 37 yards, but he was able to get the ball in the end zone with a rushing touchdown. The Stallions defense still on fire, like they've been all 3 weeks so far. Who's going to be able to stop this team? We'll get into that more later, but 8 sacks, an interception by Daniel Isom. They are still a team to be, reckoned with out there on that field. When it comes to the Memphis Showboats, Case Cookus, 139 passing yards, and a touchdown, along with Troy Williams, 100 passing yards and an interception, who came in and mop-up duty, after they were kind of down by quite a bit. The Showboats running backs, again, this is another week that we're talking about the Showboats running backs and their lackluster performance with 20 rushing yards on only 12 attempts. So the only bright spot on this team was Vinny Papali's touchdown, 3 receptions, 38 yards, along with Jonathan Adams, 6 receptions, 49 yards. The Showboats defense struggled as well. They did have 3 sacks and a fumble recovery, but it wasn't enough to help them in this 33-14 routing by the Memphis Showboats, taking it to the Birmingham Stallions. When you look at this game right here, what were the biggest things that you saw in this lopsided game in the UFL Week 3?
I mean, this is pretty simple, Drew. We've talked about the past couple shows here that the Stallions are the most complete team in the UFL. They got a little bit of everything on the roster. And the fact that Adrian Martinez went 100% nuts. I believe he was the leading rusher as well as his passing numbers for the day. And shouts to Marlon Williams. I'm not saying this just because I used to cover him for my UCF work with the black and gold banneret. Bing! But see, my voice is back. But with all that in mind, seeing him come back after the injury is also uplifting too, having that big ball in the game. But listen, when you have a quarterback and an offense that's clicking like this, and when you have a defense that's getting more sacks than I have in a large grocery order, listen, this guy is what well-rounded team. I can't put it any better. I'm trying to come up with something else creative. And listen, the only thing more well-rounded was my figure back when I was over 300 pounds. Okay. So this is very simple. This is why I'm going with the jokes on this one. There's no real analysis, complete team. And to the Stallion, to the credit to the rest of the UFL for the teams they haven't played yet, the tougher opposition's coming in the back half of the year for the Stallions. Their schedule's been relatively easy per se, right? Opening up with teams that have been struggling early and putting up a can on that. I could argue to this point, their toughest out has been a struggling Renegades team, right? And now they're starting to find their way, But yeah, it's well-rounded, man.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's been more so the defensive side that's been well-rounded for the first 2 weeks and throughout the entirety of the first 3 weeks. This is the first week where we can honestly say that the offense has caught up with the defense in production. And shout out to Dante Hill. I popped it up a second ago, but shout out to him for jumping in and saying good morning. Well, good morning to you too there, sir. Got some Eagles news that we'll talk about here in a little bit once we get through the UFL stuff from this past weekend. But the Birmingham Stallions, there's definitely some defensive players from this team who are going to get poached by the NFL for training camp, and we'll see what they can do in the preseason and if they can make a mark there. But and deservingly so, and especially from their secondary and what they're doing up front as well with getting all these sacks. The secondary causing pressure on the quarterback and getting these interceptions over the first 3 weeks, and then you got your front, that's providing pressure, that's getting the sacks, that's tackles for loss and all that stuff too on top of it. So it's looking good over there for the Stallions. They could be, 3-peat champions between their past 2 times in the USFL and now for the first time in the UFL this season for the 2024 year. And for those of you who haven't really gotten into UFL action yet, if you like hard-nosed defensive play, go look up the Birmingham Stallions highlights on the UFL YouTube channel once this show's over or whenever you get a chance in the near future. You will not be disappointed. They are definitely number 1 in the league for a reason. So for that, when it comes to the Birmingham Stallions, I'm looking forward to seeing what they can pull off. I mean, Adrian Martinez finally coming out of his shell. He was more of the mobile quarterback between him and Matt Corral. Matt Corral, more of the pocket passer. It's good to see him over this past week kind of come into his own, because, the two quarterback system, I felt like, was kind of hurting his production. And now that we see him get the full opportunity to showcase what he can do when he has 4 quarters of football to himself as the quarterback, if they got other teams that are going to play with a little bit more, they're going to be a little bit more competitive than the Showboats in the upcoming weeks. It'll be interesting to see if this continues and remains consistent from Adrian Martinez, and if we don't see Matt Corral anymore, because we were even talking about it last week, how lackluster the performance was between the two quarterbacks setup, and how I believed, and you agreed then, that this can't continue. The defense is only going to carry you, but so far, because I even made that reference to the Ravens of the NFL back in 2000, like Trent Dilfer was playing better than what these two quarterbacks are playing collectively, and he was a game manager, but he wasn't really turning the ball over in situations where they really need to convert, which was why, even though he wasn't trusted but so many times in the game, he did what was necessary to get them over the hump offensively so the defense could carry them the rest of the way. If they can remain balanced, the Stallions, from here on out on both sides of the ball, well, all three sides considering special teams, they got a good chance. But they got to remain balanced.
Yeah, I feel like there's an element here, though, too, Drew, that could take place where, this could be a single game thing where they went away from the two quarterback system situation. Maybe the secondary quarterback's injured. There would be some games. I keep using the DC Defenders last year as my example, with Jordan Tiamu evolving as he did, and how they would flop out De'Aaron King. The difference where Tiamu started to make his way is where they were like, okay, we dare you throw the ball. Oh, hell, you did it. And I think this is what we saw in this past game. I don't know that this was more about the Showboats struggling than the Stallions doing great. Could be elements of both, obviously, as every game is, but this is certainly a good first step if you believe they're going to go back and galvanize a single quarterback with Martinez. He certainly made his case this past week.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I mean, you speak volumes when you say about, the possibility of it just being the Showboat struggling too, or playing a factor. Because, I mean, when you have 139 passing yards and a touchdown from your starting quarterback, the fact that he has to get relieved, and then you have Troy Williams coming in there with another 100 yards passing and an interception. And then we already talked about the performance side of their running backs too, with only 20 rushing yards. I mean, I was talking about that too over the past few weeks, and the fact that the Showboats and their lackluster running back production was going to hurt them. And
Yep.
we now see where they're at this point in the season with having the record that they have. 1-2, it's not as bad as the 0-3 teams that there's a battle of the defeateds that we'll talk about later in the show for this upcoming week.
The Stallions defense, their credit as you have. They're the ones that did the trampling too. They made it difficult for all that to happen. We got to give them their credit too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and you are absolutely right, Ike. The Stallions are nasty, and that's the reason why they're 3-0 right now. So, yeah, absolutely. And they could potentially be, they could go undefeated the rest of the season, because, and we'll talk more about that later in the show. I've got a question that we'll pose that will fit right in with that. But when it comes
to Drew Willingham, I see you doing this.
when it comes to the UFL, though, we can at least say for week 3, this was the most lopsided of the games that we saw. So moving on to our next game that we have here on the slate, and that is the game between the Michigan Panthers and the Houston Roughnecks. The Michigan Panthers, win this game 34-20, not quite as lopsided as the previous game that we talked about, but still a pretty decisive victory for the Michigan Panthers. You've got E.J. Perry coming in for the Panthers, 208 as far as his passing yards and a touchdown, along with 9 carries for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. So 3 touchdowns from your quarterback right there definitely paid off very well for this team in the long run. Matthew Colburn, second, 9 carries, 28 yards, and a touchdown, with Marcus Sims' 4 receptions for 84 yards and a touchdown. Jake Bates, again, I'm keeping him alive with talking about this field goal kicker right here when it comes to him and his 55-yard field goal. He had 60-plus yard field goals in the first 2 weeks, a 55-yard field goal in this game. And, looking at it, he was 2 of 2 on field goals. So his 6 points definitely contributed in those 34 points that were tallied up by the Michigan Panthers. Their defense as well, 2 sacks and an interception. Puka Nakua's brother, definitely comes in again as he has made some noise in the UFL this season as well. When you look at the fact that Reed Sinnott only had 197 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception, along with 5 lackluster carries for 19 yards, but he did get a quarterback rush for a touchdown. Along with Emmanuel Butler's 3 receptions for 63 yards, Justin Hall's 5 receptions, 35 yards, and a touchdown wasn't quite enough offensively for the Houston Roughnecks to get them over the hump in this game. The Roughbacks running backs, 53 rushing yards on 20 attempts, and they did have a touchdown, but that came on the QB run right there. Looking at this game right here, especially with the hype that we've got from Jake Bates over the first 3 weeks with these Michigan Panthers and then pulling off the victory, they got a winning record right here. What are your thoughts after this week 3 contest with the Michigan Panthers right here?
Listen, you mentioned last game being the most lopsided of the week. I know the score is not as lopsided, Drew Willingham, but this to me is the biggest beatdown of the week. I don't care what the score says. Performance-wise, the Roughnecks were thoroughly dominated on the day. And by the way, it's not like Michigan's a great team. Sure, they may have a winning record, but we know how they got there. By skimping kicks and Coach C.J. Johnson having all sorts of problems with his Roughnecks. Listen, this offense has been very anemic. I'm going to need to get blood donations to get any sort of life moving forward on the season. Then over and above that, you have a special teams unit that's allowed a block punt, averaging 1 block punt a week. That's beyond unacceptable at this level, Drew Willingham, and that can't happen. You're playing like that, you're going to get beat by a team that, in my opinion, shouldn't exist, a team that stole their franchise from Florida to have less than 7,000 in the stands at Ford. I'm not. This is, you can tell Wade Phillips is not coaching in Houston anymore. I'll put it that way.
You're going to go out on a limb and go that far and say that he's not, he doesn't have as much control as we thought he did.
Oh, no, I'm telling you, Wade Phillips isn't there. It's C.J. Johnson now. Wade Phillips is coaching in San Antonio, remember. You can tell with here right here in Houston, absolutely, because their production has definitely been different from last year into here. Okay, I see what you're saying now. I kind of got lost for a second. I was like, San Antonio Brahmas, we're not even there yet. But looking at this game right here, I mean, it was a no reference, the team that was smart enough to have Florida franchises. But
I'm picking up what you're throwing down now. It is still early in the morning for myself. That cup of Folgers is definitely not kicked in yet. But looking at this game here, definitely in the second half, I would say the Panthers ran away with it because, going into halftime, they were only up by 1. It was 12-11. The offensive production didn't really come to the second half. But I will definitely agree with you. Once we got to, the second half, it definitely got to where it was a little bit more lopsided of a beat down there. But I will at least say with the Stallions game, the game we talked about previously, like when the kickoff initially happened for that game, we knew that they were winning that game. You could just tell.
Sure. But the Showboats, say this out loud. The Memphis Showboats gave up 22 points in a quarter. You can't do that. It doesn't feel right. But it does with these Roughnecks. That's my thing. Heck, both these teams. I could see the Panthers giving up 22 points in a quarter. That's what I'm getting at here.
I mean, looking at that team, they are not undefeated. They do have a loss. But then when we talk about the Roughnecks, they are 0-3 for a reason. So especially with everything that we just threw out there. But definitely with this team, they've got another 0-3, matchup this weekend where they're playing somebody that has the same record. One of these two teams is going to be 0-4, and if the Houston Roughnecks do not, fine-tune some things this week, you will see them hit to 0-4 this upcoming weekend. Moving on to the next game in this past weekend's contest, and that is the St. Louis Battlehawks and the San Antonio Brahmas. Looking at this game right here, A.J. McCarron comes out with 152 passing yards and a touchdown, along with 4 carries for 21 yards and a rushing touchdown. You take that along with Hakeem Butler's 6 receptions for 87 yards and a touchdown. Jacob Saylor's 7 carries, 62 yards and a touchdown. Andre Smite, 54-yard field goal, 3 of 3 for the day. I know I'm throwing a lot of love to the kickers today, but I mean, his 9 points that he contributed definitely helped with these Battlehawks getting this victory over the Brahmas. Then you look at Chase Garbers, 143 passing yards, a touchdown, and 3 carries for 10 yards. Wasn't enough to get those Brahmas over the hump, as they did lose by 7 points. But then you got John Lovett's 12 carries for 41 yards and a touchdown. Anthony McFarland's 9 carries for 39 yards and a touchdown. Contributing there with those 2 touchdowns on the ground definitely helped keep the Brahmas in it with the lackluster play at the quarterback position. But then you have Cody Latimer, 7 receptions, 58 yards. John Trey Kirkland, 8 receptions for 52 yards, along with a 15-yard pass completion as a wide receiver who used to be a quarterback back in the day. And then you got the Brahmas defense, 2 sacks and a fumble recovery. Looking at this game right here, Kyle, our previous 2 games that we talked about weren't as close as this one right here. The Brahmas appeared to be in this game until the end here. What are your thoughts when it comes to this team right here? And, they're not undefeated anymore, but they put up a fight against a very good St. Louis Battlehawks team.
No, and you'll also note here, and we're going to talk more about it later in the show, Drew, that the Brahmas quarterback did get hurt. So, certainly a factor. I mean, we expected a good game with this game, okay? The next game we were talking about was the one that you and I think we're looking most forward to as far as how close the matchup would be. But, guy, man, I got to tell you, the Brahmas are going to be a force to deal with. And A.J. McCarron, I know he only had 152 yards, but the touchdowns that were put on the board, the offense still did enough and put up the points. When you're playing the Brahmas, yardage and points are always at a premium. This is the game we expected. This could have gone either way. And props to both these teams for giving UFL a quality showing, man.
Absolutely. I mean, A.J. McCarron, second year with the Battlehawks, definitely, his chemistry with this team is definitely coming through and helping them in tight moments where, it takes that leadership to get them to the other side of the victory right here, to where if you had a less experienced quarterback who didn't have the type of chemistry that he does with his offense, I don't think they'd be able to get these close victories they've gotten in the first 3 weeks. So 2-1 on the first 3 weeks now, based on what they've done, back-to-back victories here. Started off a little rough for them in that first week, but they're definitely starting to click on all cylinders now when you look at how things are going. And, you got to give it up to the kickers here. Again, 9 points contributed there, getting the help where it's needed. And speaking of getting help, we've got Mickey Delaney in the house checking us out right now. What's up there, Mick? Our super fan, our comment cop out there. So Ike is out there too. They're sharing the love with each other, saying "Morning, Ike, my brother," followed by "Sup, Mick." So
that's the kind of respect that Superman and Lex Luthor have with one another. You know what I'm saying? Like that.
yeah, absolutely. And and Mick's out there being the comment cop for Ike, because Ike sometimes does not stay in his lane, and for that, I will give Mick this.
Acknowledge me.
I will acknowledge him for being the comment cop, as he will tell Ike sometimes this.
You should know your role and shut your mouth.
Absolutely. The shenanigans are underway here with Total Football Talk. And now when we look at these games right here, we've got to discuss what, in my opinion, would be the game of the week. Right here with the game of the week that we have, you got to look at the DC Defenders taking it to the Arlington Renegades here in a 29-28 game, winning there at the end. We're seeing these dividends with this 4th and 12 play. It's definitely helping out in situations like this. Jordan Ta'amu, 188 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, along with 9 carries for 53 rushing yards. Kelvin Harmon, 2 receptions for 51 yards, along with Chris Rowlands, 2 receptions for 36 yards and a touchdown. Receiving-wise, contributed very positively for this DC Defenders team. Again, love to the kickers. Matthew McCrane, 58-yard field goal, 3 of 3 on field goals for the day, which helped contributed 9 points in the DC Defenders' 29-28 victory over the Renegades. Luis Perez, 290 passing yards with 2 touchdowns. Davion Smith, 14 carries for 63 yards. Lindsey Scott, 3 carries, 20 yards and a touchdown, along with Tyler Vaughn's 9 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown, and J.P. Payton's 2 receptions for 29 yards and a touchdown helped keep this Renegades team very, very tight with this Defenders team throughout 4 quarters of football. When you look at this game right here, Kyle, especially how things went from, halftime on, looking at how things were when it was a 14-9 Renegades game, they were winning by 5 points. Going into halftime, what were your thoughts in seeing how this game went back and forth in the second half?
Didn't this go exactly the way I said it would, except for that very end part? I didn't know you were going to pull off something quite like that. Props to you, Coach Barlow, for being brave enough to do it. But listen, I told you several times not to count Luis Perez and this Arlington Renegades team out. I could even argue after starting with this tough a schedule, they're going to be that sneaky team that everybody starts to sleep on. But as they play some of the weaker teams in the league, start getting some wins and making themselves a factor, they snuck up and got the XFL championship, bouncing back from a weak start. Don't think they can't do the same thing here, Drew Willingham.
No, absolutely right. I mean, the DC Defenders, they got to the championship game last year in the XFL for a reason. They started off a little rough, like you were saying. 2-1 is where they're at now. Looking at this Arlington Renegades game, this Arlington Renegades team, talking about their bumps too. Again, even though they got to where they did last year, I don't think that if they would have started like this, with the potential of going 0-4 this upcoming weekend, even though the Roughnecks team, in my opinion, we'll get into that a little bit more later, has a little bit more deficiencies than the Renegades team, because these losses that they're accruing, they've been pretty close, okay? And this one being the closest of the 3. But still, they're putting up a good fight, especially in these past 2 weeks. The first week was rough, but the past 2 weeks have been pretty close for this Renegades team. So when I put all that into perspective, they're not completely out of it yet, but if they lose this upcoming weekend and go 0-4, I think it's safe to say the Renegades are not going back to the championship game this year.
I mean, they tried to rule out the Renegades after going 0-3, and then they won a close one against the Orlando Guardians in Arlington and took that to the house. I'm just throwing. Now, here's the difference. They're in the tougher conference in this UFL league. I have no problem going out on a limb and saying that. But, yeah, I'll put it this way. If they were in the USFL conference, which they're not, obviously, as a former XFL team, but if they were, I feel like that they would, I feel like if they were playing those teams that other than the Stallions, they'd have a better shot. And we'll see that materialize later in the year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And looking forward to seeing how that pays off. But I just think when you have, now that the mergers happen, and you got a team like the Stallions in there, and then, other teams that come along with that aren't slouches either. I just don't see there's a possibility that a team that starts 0-3 for the second consecutive year makes it back to the championship game. And especially with the way things are structured in this newly merged league. So it's going to be interesting to see how things pay off for this team going forward for the remainder of the season. But it's not starting out that great. And we were saying the same thing last year when they started out the way they did. But hey, surprised us then. They may surprise us again into defense for what Kyle's saying. But with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and take this into our first commercial break. But when we come back, we've got some other news to break down for you here on Total Football Talks episode here, especially some NFL action and a big re-signing or extension from this past week. We'll get back to that on the other side of this commercial break.
All right, let's go. We got trips right at 42, 989 on 2. Ready? Break.
We're just getting started. Total Football Talk will return right after this.
everything Boston. I love you morons. You kids on the block, new edition.
Dear whatever the law firm is. Sincerely, the U.S. Supreme Court.
Ben Affleck, Matt Damon. Go yourself again, Jason.
Ready to hang with some fellas who know football? Let's ride. LC Muscles 28.
I think they're the most overrated defense in the league.
Steel Sermon.
We did not trail for a single second.
Tiny Tim.
McCarthy is a bonehead.
A Pizzle 90.
I'm going with my boys. Fins up, baby.
Get ready for the Four Horsemen of Peckham's. Every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central on YouTube. Poppy J.
You got the option to cry for the government. You got the option to protest. You got the option to keep buying. But this is also an option.
Wise El Jefe.
We're the first tech geeks. We're the first gamers. We're the first everything. Everything. Like Gen X's, we are the ones.
BS3 Network proudly presents the crew from the New York boroughs who never wants that smoke. Nah, they want that fire. Poppy J and Wise El Jefe. Fridays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. Check your local listings for your viewing and listening pleasure.
Welcome back to Total Football Talk, your source for hard-hitting gridiron action. And speaking of that, you know, I said something earlier along the lines of we had some news for you, and we're going to take you there for some breaking news right now. Oh, yeah! That's right! It's time for breaking news, and that is Total Football Talk will have a new day and new time starting next week. Next Monday, April 22nd. You will see Total Football Talk from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time starting next Monday at 4 p.m. So Cole will be back soon. There will be an announcement for that as well, but the show's moving to Mondays. Because that'll help him out with his scheduling along with my own. So for those of you who've been tuning in and watching us here in the mornings, thank you very much for tuning in and watching this show. But we are going back to an afternoon time and moving to Mondays beginning next week. But for now, we are back to the UFL Week 3 recap. The Stallions decimated the Showboats in the home opener, and we went through all of that recap in the previous segment. But, you know, for now, we got to take it to the Gridiron Scoop. And my man, Dante Hill, if you are still out there in the comments, I know you've got something to say about this one that I'm about to bring up to you right now. The Eagles and wide receiver Devontae Smith agree to a 3-year, $75 million extension. Kyle, is this a good move or a bad move for the team's future? And will his production continue to pay dividends towards the team's growth?
Well, keep in mind, it's 50 of that or 51 million of that that's guaranteed. So with that in mind, it doesn't bother me so much. We don't have all of the details yet. But suffice all of it to say, there is a trend. There's a rising cap overall, right? The value of the cap for every NFL team's going up. So deals like this happening with all the run that's been made on receivers in this past offseason, right? Stephon Diggs, Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, among others. I can see why the Eagles want to lock in Smith to get the job done. And listen, Devontae Smith's been a factor since his rookie year. Where they did this thing called the Super Bowl. Maybe you remember that, Drew Willingham. But listen, I've talked to Devontae Smith personally at that Super Bowl in question that you mentioned, the week leading into it, I should say. And he was a guy that knew that work was going to be part of what he did in development, that he was only on the ground floor and that he could continue to build as an NFL player. The Eagles see that potential as well. I don't dislike this maneuver. If this is a guy that group wants to hold on to, you're going to have to invest. The rookie salary, is something that can reduce the value of cap hits on a contract. But to sign a guy like this early prevents him from being even more expensive in the future.
Oh, absolutely. And, you speak about that Super Bowl year that they had, the year before last, and that was arguably his best productive season in his 3 seasons that he's had so far, because, in 17 games, he had 95 receptions for 1,196 yards with 7 touchdowns. And then in this past year in 2023, the production went down a little bit. He played in 1 less game, had 14 less receptions for only 1,066 yards. He did have 7 touchdowns again. But,
it's in air quotes.
You say that again?
Only 1,000. I'll put in air quotes.
Only 1,000. But you have to admit the numbers did go down a little bit. And the numbers for the overall team and the reason why they were ousted so early in the playoffs, I mean, things took a turn after they had that hot start to the year. So through the last 6 to 7 games, they were pretty dormant in comparison to what they did to start the season in this past year. And Dante, you can definitely agree with that too out there in comment land. But hey, I'm just giving you the facts. But does he deserve the money? I would say so, because he's been a top target for Jalen Hurts, and they wouldn't have gotten to the Super Bowl without him being a target for him.
And I like the point that Dante makes about setting the market. That's a good one too. I would argue you got Devontae Smith at what is a market price now, and something that will only go up later. But be careful, Drew, reading too much into stats, okay? Because there's a couple anomalies that you got to account for. For one, you mentioned yourself, 1 less game compared to the previous year in production. That's obviously a factor. Moreover, losing their offensive coordinator was huge for this Eagle team, okay? The reason why they had problems later is because the fact that their offense was not clicking the same way. They were exposed like Janet Jackson in a halftime show. But Devontae Smith still breaking that 1,000-yard receiving mark means he was still somebody who was getting open.
Oh, absolutely. And Dante agrees. Like you were saying, he loves the deal. It shows that you can sign 2-star wide receivers. And he loves the fact that we got it done before Waddle and T. Higgins and set the market. Now we have to see what Seattle does. And that's a solid point.
Yeah, and the Bengals are starting to agree that same point. Hey, it's been shown you can sign 2-star receivers. Them franchising T. Higgins this past week. Another team that's showing, like the Dolphins here. We'll see how that extension goes with Waddle. I don't know. He's going to be expensive is what I'm telling you. But, yeah, there's just that point that Dante Hill makes is one that'll kind of reverberate throughout the league. I 100% agree.
Absolutely. And our problem was Nick and the coaching staff. Dante says he's not worried about the player, but the coaching staff.
Excellent point. That offensive group needs to learn that you don't take a mobile quarterback and constantly put him in the shotgun. You don't try to take a mobile, versatile weapon and constantly try to give handoffs to a running back out of the shotgun. There's a reason Deontay Swift wasn't as productive as he could have been and why he's in a different place. Saquon's not going to solve that problem, so hopefully they'll learn to actually hand the ball off from under center some too, and actually disguise some things they're doing. So the point about the coaching's right. I just wanted to build on how right Dante Hill was pointing that out.
With the amount of money that the Eagles have spent in this offseason, you would think between having Saquon Barkley, who should alleviate the load as far as the rushing attempts for Jalen Hurts, if they do it the right way. And then, of course, paying, Devontae Smith like you are now, you got 2 targets here between your running back and your wide receiver that should alleviate the pressure on Jalen Hurts a little bit. Just hopefully the replacement for Jason Kelce and what they do with the offensive line can help keep them all upright. Is what I'm thinking. And because I mean, it's hard to replace a legend, and a staple of the offensive line like Kelsey has been for over a decade now. We're going to see a difference there. Hopefully, it's a positive one. Because everybody, they're a rival of a team that I like, but just because I love football in general, I like competitiveness and seeing a great game. I don't want to see a lopsided game. So I want to see everybody have the best talent possible so we can get the greatest games that we possibly can when we're watching them. So San Francisco as well can look at this as a blueprint for Brock Purdy.
Kind of. It's not that what he's saying there is wrong in theory. I just don't think the Niners operate that way.
Hey, at least the Niners have operated well enough to get you as far as they've gotten, and hopefully they can get over the hump in the near future and get you another Super Bowl ring. But we'll leave that for another topic at another time.
Quickly, to Dante's point, though, allegedly, Brandon Ayuk was supposed to be out yesterday. Still hasn't happened yet. So it's very interesting. We'll see what happens. Now watch breaking news happen right after the show to make me look stupid for saying that. But, let's put it this way. Jimmy Garoppolo was supposed to be out of San Francisco how many times before he played again and got supplanted by Brock Purdy? So you never know what's going on in San Francisco, man. It's crazy. Even though sometimes they'll straight up tell you just refuse to believe it.
But had you not had that roller coaster that you had with Jimmy G, you wouldn't have gotten Brock Purdy, even though you got him as Mr. Irrelevant. Everything works out for a reason.
Yeah. No. That's first of all abundantly true. The point I'm making though is a guy that was supposed to be out for a long time before Brock was even a factor was Jimmy G. Right? He was supposed, Trey Lance, he's totally gone. Ends up coming in and ends up never having left the team. The Niners were crushed for even keeping him on the damn roster. What happened was they got it right. So. I'll follow their goal with that too.
That is for John Lynch, that was probably one of the best insurance policies we've seen pay off. And he got the last little bit of greatness. I wouldn't say greatness, but positive play out of Jimmy G before the following season when he's gone. And we saw how it worked out with the Raiders. So,
Jake from State Farm is jealous of how good the Niners are at insurance.
So I guess we could definitely say how Jimmy G is more of a system quarterback than you could probably say he's more of a system quarterback than Brock Purdy because he's only had success in certain systems between the Patriots for the little bit of time he got there and then with the 49ers. But then he goes to the Raiders with Josh McDummy and couldn't do anything.
Well, right. Yeah. I'll put it this way. Both the Pats and the Niners have had game managers as their quarterbacks for decades, right? Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick, and of course Brock and Jimmy were both game manager guys. The Patriots, Tom Brady was a game manager. Jacoby Brissett was a game manager. Jimmy G was a game manager. The term game manager needs to stop being used as a slur for quarterbacks. Simply put.
If you can get positive results, I'm all for it. You can have a game manager if you want to call him that as your quarterback. I'm all for it. We signed 2 linemen, a receiver, a safety, and a defensive end. Is that like what you've already signed or what you think you need to sign?
I think he meant to say we need to sign. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking because I would think that he would have thrown out there the running back and all that stuff too with what they've done. But yeah, I would say
you need to coach up the guys you got. There's a lot of youth on that side of the ball, but
yeah, and also, you got to think about Lane Johnson too. I mean, he's coming back, but this is more likely his last year. So you got to start thinking about beyond this season too, if you're really trying to build something special for the young talent on your offensive side of the ball.
In fairness, when Nick Sirianni's fired, the next coach will think about that in 25. Hashtag I said it, Drew Willingham.
Ooh, Kyle Nash out here dropping bombs already. Damn! So what you're saying is you're expecting the Eagles to take this for the second year in a row.
I mean, look, when a team like the Cowboys dominates your division and you get outed by an NFC South team in the playoffs, you do the math, Chief.
Oh, my brother, testify.
Isn't it nice that I'm talking about something other than Sam Howell, Drew Willingham in that way?
I'm glad that we have switched the gears there, Kyle Nash.
You like that? You like that?
Oh, I do. And when it comes to your source for hard-hitting gridiron action, along with a little bit of side of shenanigans.
You got the right one, baby.
Oh!
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now,
I'm never ready for the Harry Rowan Gardner. I'm just not.
I like throwing those little curveballs out there because he couldn't throw a curveball, but he could definitely throw the heat, and I can sling the heat when necessary. You know how it is, Kyle Nash, ready to rock and roll on episode 33. And Dante says, we'll be fine at the line. This started Jason Peters, and then we lost Brandon Brooks.
Yeah, I think it's fair. He's got a fair point. You could kick that can down the road to 25. I'm with that.
Yeah, because, I mean, especially when you see Nick Sirianni jabbering at the fans like he was last year and how that paid off for him. I mean, he got instant karma right after that, and I absolutely loved watching that. No offense, Dante. So moving on to the next topic here, we'll go back to the UFL, and then we'll come back to the NFL. But for this one, we've got the Brahmas starting quarterback, Chase Garbers, rolled out for the remainder of the season due to wrist injury. Can the Brahmas offense remain consistent with another quarterback at the helm? What are your thoughts on this one, Kyle?
You know, I would feel confident if the Brahmas coach was someone who had been in a situation where they had a really tough, stalwart defensive team that could carry the ball occasionally, and who had a hurt quarterback in the past, and then took them to the playoffs and nearly the championship of a league. If only such a coach existed. Oh, wait, it's Wade freaking Phillips. So, yeah, I'm perfectly confident that the Brahmas will keep their standard high, and I think they'll still be a tough team. Listen, the Brahmas, even under Charlie Ward last year, may not have been the most, explosive offense, but they would smash the bejesus out of you on defense and always be a factor in every game because of it. So I expect more of the same from the Brahmas. Listen, nobody likes having a starting quarterback be out. You'll probably lose, air quotes, a touchdown a game, assuming you can't replicate the production. I get it. It's difficult, but this team's uniquely qualified to minimize the damage, control the damage, if you will, and still be a nasty threat. Am I saying UFL champion? Obviously not. But nobody wants to play the Brahmas because then you're sore trying to play next week. I'm just saying.
I mean, even with the way the Brahmas were last year under Hines Ward, their record didn't
Hines Ward, God.
No, you're good. But their record didn't necessarily reflect the talent that was on the team. I mean, they played better than what their record was. Looking at how things are this year, we're definitely seeing, I mean, there's been some changes within the roster along with coaching as well. It's not the exact same team that we saw last year, but they're definitely living up to their talent on the roster this year.
The identity is still the same. You're right, Drew.
Yes, and probably a enhanced identity now that you got a Super Bowl champion, even though he's a defensive coordinator, but he's still a Super Bowl champion and a coach in Wade Phillips, okay, who's got a really, really lengthy resume in the game of football itself, primarily in professional football.
Including having drafted this guy, J.J. Watt. Just say it.
Yes, and help develop him, to an extent as well. So when you think about that, they could have been 3-0 this weekend. We could still have two undefeated teams in the league. This game was really, really close, and I was talking, with some others throughout the weekend as well, and saying I was thinking that they could pull it off when it was as close as it was, especially in the second half. But our picks last week, and what we said with them taking the L and losing to the Battlehawks, came into fruition. And it's just because even though the Brahmas have established their identity, as that was the topic that we had for the week 1 recap a couple weeks back, even though they've established their identity, the Battlehawks have an even further established identity between what they did last year. They do have some pieces that were on that team who have returned, and especially their leadership at quarterback in A.J. McCarron.
Yep.
And Garbers played really well these first 3 games. Jontre Kirkland, the wide receiver, came in and threw that one pass for 15 yards. But I don't know if at this point in the season, if you switch and have him as your quarterback, because even though he can do that in a bowl game, there's a difference from doing that in a bowl game and then doing it for another 2.5 for like another month and a half, till you get through the playoffs. If you get to the playoffs, and we're going a little bit ahead of ourselves, but you still have another good 6 to 7 weeks left of this season. And, there's a lot of game of football left. Do you bring somebody in off the street? Do you make a trade? Because last year, like Perez with the Renegades, there was the trade that was made there that brought him in. So looking around the league, the only other starting quarterback who I've seen somewhat get benched was the Stallions, Matt Corral. Do you bring him in? Does his style of play fit this team? Do you think that that's where they go this week prior to their week 4 contest?
Yeah, no, there's so many. This is what's tough about a spring league is I feel like they have even more options because the standard isn't quite as high at the quarterback position. That's no disrespect to the UFL. That's just the position of quarterback is a lot more complicated and a lot more intricate like that. I mean, you mentioned bringing guys in. How about what Arlington and to bring in Luis Perez and get a damn championship out of it? Who saw that coming? Or it could backfire. Orlando brought in Paxton Lynch, and that did not go particularly well for them. So I'll put it this way. I'm not here to predict what they're going to do, but I can tell you that 7 weeks is a long time to figure it out, to your point.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we'll see how that pays off. I don't think that Matt Corral would be the option to go with. And that's, even though Luis Perez was kind of lackluster before he came over to the Renegades, I don't think that would be as dramatic of a transition as Perez going to the Renegades in 2022 or 2023 than if like Corral went to the Brahmas in 2024. I don't think that they have the answer on their roster, or I could be wrong right now. But like you said, Spring League, there's so many other options. And had this happened, 3 weeks or so from now, when we've already gone through the NFL draft and there's free agents out there who haven't been picked up, who need to audition, who would love to have 3 to 4 games to showcase their worth, before a training camp for the NFL coming up, that'd be the perfect opportunity for that to happen. But unfortunately, it happened a little too early, not quite like Aaron Rodgers is 4 plays into the season and he goes down. At least Chase Garbers got a little bit of action this year. And you think about the Brahmas now, the quarterback's gone down, their field goal kicker, it went down from the previous week on a special teams play on a kickoff where he didn't, where he led with his head, didn't have the right form with his tackle, and now has a neck injury and is out for the remainder of the year, potentially for his career.
Which is the UFL's fault, by the way, for not adopting the spring league kicking style that the NFL did. But don't get me started on how they made destroying a sympathetic character and all this. De La Haye got gypped on that, man.
Yeah, and I hear you on that, and I'm with you on that. But part of me also wants to say that you got to at least throw out the way his form was when he made that tackle. All right, so
he's a kicker. I mean, what do you want me to tell you, Drew?
I know, and kickers don't spend a lot of time working on that. They spend more time getting it in between the goalposts. But again, they need to find a way to work with this on special teams and get these kickers to learn how to kick, not just to kick, but to tackle as well. Because he didn't even get a chance to kick a field goal yet. I mean, he was close. All he was doing was kickoffs. And he was talking about, he was a content creator. Well, he still is. I'm talking past tense, but he's a content creator. So I actually watched his video last week as a result of that play and him recapping his season. This is closing a chapter, but he's going to make an epic comeback. To me, that says he's going to try to make a comeback here in the next year or two. But who's to say that it does or doesn't happen? I hope so for the young man, because you never want to see anything like that happen. But this needs to be a lesson learned to all kickers. Look at what Pat McAfee did. You need to be like Pat McAfee if you're going to be making tackles and play like that, if you're going to actually be trying to make an impact on special teams outside of just doing your job with your leg, because this right here can cost you career or potentially years off of your playing career if you do this the wrong way.
Well, listen, you're not wrong. Two things: punters are built different than kickers, and two, if you happen to be Pat McAfee's size, it doesn't hurt either. Destroying's more built like a receiver. He's not designed to do that, and he got into the mid. But again, I maintain, and it's just like the rant I went on a couple weeks back on the Student of the Game podcast. Bing! The NFL adopted your kicking style, and now you have a guy hurt who was headlining your league as a kicker, by the way, because of his content creation, and you blew it in a scenario where a face of your league was somewhere he shouldn't be. That's completely on you.
Facts. 100% agree with that. Oh, my bad. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Completely on you, as in UFL, right?
I wish they would have called it the Ultimate Football League, though. Lazily just taking the states out of United States Football League and just calling it United Football League. You could have called it Ultimate Football League. That's what I would have been a fan of. I'm still a fan of it anyway.
Yeah,
but
you're not wrong. They stole it, and I'm trying to forget about the Orlando Tuskers being a thing. But anyways.
The New York Jets released new uniforms with dramatic video to garner attention to fan base yesterday. Can these new uniforms help break the 55-year Super Bowl drought for this team, Kyle Nash?
Do these uniforms do like in the movie Deadpool and inject mutant powers for a superior healing factor? Because
to the no, hell no, to the no.
Because unless they do that, it just doesn't matter. Okay, I'm just throwing it out there. I said Brett Favre. I said that. Well, I said that about Brett Favre too when he went to the Jets. But I said Aaron Rodgers was an injury risk. I didn't think it was gonna be that. But yeah, you can. Now he actually was hurt and is coming back, which means he's more injury prone and even less mobile. Anyway, yeah. Mr. Bullwinkle was the play there. Well done, sir.
Thank you. And for my rebuttal,
Let me talk to you.
when it comes to this team right here, to piggyback off what my man Kyle Nash was saying.
Hell to the no, no. Hell no, to the no.
If you think that these new uniforms are going to help this team in its 55-year drought at the Super Bowl championship,
stop it. Get some help.
Because if they do pull this off from the 2024 season, it will be a total
surprise, motherfucker.
Absolutely. I will be up here saying the Jets won the Super Bowl.
What?
The Jets won the Super Bowl.
What?
From new uniforms.
What?
No.
You can't handle the truth.
Because if you're going to sit up here and say that based on new uniforms in a hype video, that this team is going to win the damn Super Bowl.
That was a lie.
And again, it will be a total
Surprise, motherfucker.
Get ready to be served that season.
I mean, the fact that they're doing that to sell the team kind of proves they're not really sure about what they're doing. I'm not mad at them for the hype and trying to get people interested like the arrival did of Aaron Rodgers last year in the first place. But yeah, listen.
Oh, my brother, testify.
I can't say it any clearer than that, Drew Willingham.
When I saw somebody make a post yesterday about how great these uniforms were and it to be expecting a Super Bowl victory, all I could think of was,
now, that is absurd.
Because last year, the Jets were on this list right here of dumpster Pelicans, and they will remain on this list of dumpster Pelicans from here on out until Kyle Nash and I, Cole Johnson, or anybody else say otherwise.
That's not coming from me anytime soon. So let's not mark your calendars or anything.
And based on your new uniforms, New York Jets, this is how the overall consensus is on it.
Ain't nobody care. Who cares? Ain't nobody care.
And for the fire bestowed upon you by Kyle Nash and myself in this previous segment.
Acknowledge me.
Acknowledge us. And Dante has acknowledged and says, it's a great promotion for Madden. Thanks Skin Packs, the increased stats per players.
I mean, listen, the Jets are a great Madden team. I'll give them that much credit because they don't have injuries. Anyways.
Oh, that was so great. I forgot to take the comment down during the transition. But no, that was great. Thank you, Dante, for that one and keeping us active here with that one. And for our last one of the Gridiron Scoop segment, let's go back to the UFL and say, the Birmingham Stallions defense has been decimating their opponents through the first 3 weeks. Kyle, will any UFL offense be able to move the chains enough to serve a loss to this team this season?
Well, here's what I find interesting about that, Drew, because the upcoming weeks, you would see that they're about to go face the Defenders. Now, I don't think they're the best offense in the league, but they're certainly better than anything they've played yet. Matter of fact, they're escaping what I would call a best offense in the league to this point up until week 9. That's when they get the Battlehawks, and that's the one I got circled. And who knows, maybe that'll be relevant for some sort of seeding or something for both sides there too, because listen, clearly they are the creme de la creme of the USFL conference. I don't think anyone's questioning that. Matter of fact, they're playing like they should be in the XFL conference. Hashtag I said it. But this Stallions team, taking nothing from them, just hasn't been challenged yet. And listen, the Renegades didn't have a good start too. They didn't really show what I think they can be later in the season.
So you think that the Renegades have a shot at giving them a loss this season?
Well, the Battlehawks, yeah.
Oh, the Battlehawks. Okay. So the Battlehawks and the Defenders are like your two teams that you think they can serve L's to the Stallions.
Yeah, the ones with the best chance. Yeah.
And I would say that would definitely be some good picks right there. And I want to say that the Battlehawks, in my opinion, have a better opportunity to do that if by the time that they face them, they still are undefeated. Yeah. Because just what we were talking about earlier in the opening drive, the chemistry that this team has, and it's obviously been on display throughout the first 3 weeks and in the previous 2 weeks in their back-to-back wins. The Defenders, in some cases, are a little suspect, and I saw even more of that in this past week, to where it's taken the very end, some fourth down conversions and stuff in order for them to get to the point to where they can win 29-28 against a team that couldn't even get a win the first 2 weeks. And we're talking about last year, and they were 0-3 and got to the championship. But again, this is a different league now with different teams, and it's not structured the same. You got 2 different talent pools in one. It's not the same exact league as it was. So to me, it's a lot harder to go from 0-2 to a championship than it was from 0-3 to a championship. And now you're 0-3, and it's based on the results from playing this team right here in the Birmingham Stallions. So out of your 2 teams, I really like the Battlehawks' chances over the Defenders to serve that first L to this team right here.
Sure. I would remind you about this, though. We kind of trailed off to the Renegades. Let me make this point again. They're 0-3, playing the best 3 teams in the league back to back to back. And I think the Renegades are set to play the Brahmas next week, right? Or no? Or
no.
The Roughnecks. I'll tell you this: if they lose the Roughnecks next week, then I'll start selling my stock in the Renegades. In the meantime, I'm still buying hard. They've played the best 3 teams in the league to this point.
Yeah, and they're not like getting absolutely decimated, but
one could argue they should have beat your Defenders, Chief.
They should have. I'm not mad at you there, but looking at this team right here in the Stallions, it's tough to see any team outside of those two teams, especially the Battlehawks. It's tough to see any other team give this team a loss this year. So we'll see how things pay off, but they are the back-to-back USFL champions for a reason. And with that being said, let's go ahead and take this into our Grand Champ segment, talk about our MVP of the week.
Total Football Talk.
Oh yeah, where my dogs at? It's time for the Grand Champ, the dog of the week. And with that being said, Kyle, out of all the players in the past week 3 UFL action, who is your dog of the week?
Listen, obviously you've been throwing a lot of flowers at the Stallions defense, and I'm not mad at you for doing it. However, seeing somebody bring himself head and shoulders above where he's been thus far this season, doing it, passing and running the football, Adrian Martinez for the week is who I have. Listen, a pure runaway loss, or runaway victory rather, handling business as they did against the Showboats. Adrian Martinez is my guy this week. I can't front on what he's done, separating himself, turning a 2-quarterback system into the, I got this show. You can't front on that, Drew Willingham.
So Adrian Martinez is who you're going with, and I like your pick there. You know, there's not many other cases that I can make for anybody else who kind of would outplay Adrian Martinez, and especially like you said, with his arm and on the ground, you have to give it to him there. However, there was one other player that led his team to a victory, and another one that you thought was a little bit more of a lopsided one in a way based on what they did in the second half. And that came off of the quarterback for the Michigan Panthers, the E.J. Perry. E.J. Perry. 208 passing yards and a touchdown, 9 carries, 60 yards, and 2 touchdowns, giving 3 converted touchdowns on the day to help score 34 points in the Michigan Panthers 34-20 routing over the Houston Roughnecks. I like what you picked there for Adrian Martinez because, you know, his first game as the main guy at quarterback, you see the paying dividends. However, with what the Michigan Panthers are doing, and based on the fact they've had a lot of hype around their kicker in Bates, you see E.J. Perry is the other player for this team that's helping in a positive way get Michigan Panthers multiple victories already in this early season.
Hey, I had E.J. Perry until I looked at the stats for Adrian Martinez. So ain't nobody mad at you, kid.
Yeah. So, hey, great minds think alike, my man. So when you look at all that, we had some great play in the UFL this past week, and we got some more things to discuss and, you know, bring up for the upcoming week 4 here after our next commercial break. We'll see you here on the other side of this next commercial break.
Coming up next, the featured attractions. This is Total Football Talk. Comey Media Incorporated, creating content magic in the real world.
Little right here. Look at the inside of these cakes. Now, when you bite into it, just as I demonstrated while you were talking at the beginning of your discussion right there, I could taste the drugs inside of this cake, sick. I could taste the addiction within the cream filling of this cake right here, to where they not only us with that cake right there, but they made an ice cream out of it. They made an ice cream out of it. A 1-pint Christmas tree cake ice cream. Look at that little just smile up there. Look, she is up to no good on there. Look at that. Look at that smile on there, sick. She knows that she got you. Got him is what's in her mind right now.
Acknowledge me.
Look at that little smile right there. She's up to no good.
D. Willie in the evening. Thursdays at 11:15 p.m. Eastern, 10:15 p.m. Central. Exclusively on Sertoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, look. Hey, stop playing games. Y'all already know. Go ahead and toss him some Willie Bucks. Ain't nobody playing around. And $ D Willie 87. Go ahead, hit him up on the Cash App, and go ahead and give him some Willie the bucks. Look at Drew looking stoic, ladies and gentlemen, stoic on that $10 bill. So go ahead, slide my man over some Willie bucks, and we good. That's all I'm saying. We good. Slide some Willie bucks.
Sertoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
If you're looking for a sports program that gives you the flavor.
Washington Commanders? Really?
This whole thing stinks to high heaven.
That pulls no punches.
Thuggish act by a thuggish actor.
That gives you some humor.
Praise everything LeBron does and never criticize it.
If you want a show that gives you good times, then this is that show. BS3 Network proudly presents.
I am Cole Johnson, and welcome to
Cole Sports with a Z. Every Friday on Patreon, and every Saturday on YouTube, Spreaker, and all other outlets.
Welcome back to Total Football Talk, your source for hard-hitting gridiron action. As we recap Week 3's UFL action and take you to the preview of the Week 4 action. You know, when it comes to the things we talked about in the Gridiron Scoop, you got to look at the chopping block that we have next and the topics that we have for that. I think you guys will like where we're going to transcend with that. Let's go ahead and take it into the chopping block and see what you have to say for this one. And Ike says, when are y'all talking TB12? Well, ironically, right now is our next topic. And Thomas Edward Patrick Brady II cracks door open for NFL return under specific circumstance. Will we see the greatest of all time of all quarterbacks return to the NFL this season or ever again, Kyle Nash?
So here's the thing, guys. You haven't figured out yet. I don't mean to come down on my guy, Drew Willingham, who's the show's producer and running the slate in lieu of Cole Johnson currently. I don't mean to come after him. There are many, many great minds that have fallen into the trap of staring into the dreamy eyes of Thomas Edward Patrick Bieber Brady and believing whatever silly propaganda he's going to spew. Oh, look, it's not really the tuck back rule. Oh, it's not real. Oh, I might go play if the league will let me, but if I'm an owner, they may not let me. But I wouldn't be against it. Listen. There's a certain moment in a Dave Chappelle comedy sketch where he takes his two hands together like he's got a crane and or he has a cane and he's pulling you back where he goes, gotcha, bitch. Okay? Let me tell you this. Say what you will about Thomas Edward Patrick Brady, whether you think he's the GOAT or you acknowledge that he's actually not because you have working brain cells and two eyes that sees he can't run the football. Okay? He's fooled you again. He's smart enough to know that doing that makes him relevant. Does anybody even remember the name of the podcast he was on where he said it? I'll wait. Go look it up because I know I don't remember. Fooled you. Okay? Ha ha. I'm going all over the place. I'm going Rick Moranis from Spaceballs and Nelson Munson one take back to back through Willingham. The fact that people think this is the thing is pure comedy. The fact that this is the thing is proof that the only football we have going right now is featured by a guy who's a kicker who hurt his neck because you were too stupid to enact your proper kickoff rules. What are we doing? Well, we actually think this might be a damn thing. But I can't get mad at you. Everybody's talking about it. Nick Wright and Chris Broussard were arguing about it on the first thing first. I don't know. This isn't, listen, props to Thomas Edward, Patrick Bieber, Brady for doing the great hype machine and trapping the world and playing. Oh, God, no, this is not real. It's not real.
When it came to the rant by Kyle Nash.
You like that? You like that?
I absolutely did. That was absolutely great when you look at that. But hey, you say that Thomas Edward Patrick Brady II doesn't run the ball, Kyle Nash. Gotta let you know that in his illustrious career, he rushed for 1,123 yards on 693 attempts for an average of 1.6 yards per carry. So he can run the ball because he did have 28 rushing touchdowns. He can move when he needs to.
20 years, Drew Willingham. 20 years.
But hey, that's a 1,123 more rushing yards that you or I don't have in the NFL. So we gotta say,
when it's necessary, oil too. Hey, why not? Let's keep going.
He tried his best. He tried his best.
Oh, hey, listen, for all the friendly banter we have about Thomas Edward Patrick Bieber Brady II, sorry, I have never accused him of not trying hard. Let's not be stupid. Yeah.
He did what he could. But when it comes to that, Kyle Nash is saying no, and I think that I have to agree. I don't think that Tom Brady comes back either. I don't see it. As much as those of us out there would love to see him get 100,000 passing yards or whatnot, it's just not going to happen, Kyle Nash.
Hey. Matter of fact, let's mark it here. What is it, 116 or something into the show? I want that rant to be right behind the bleep Boston rant that's in one.
Who's giving them the business?
And definitely giving them the business there. That's why we have this here for the chopping block. But our next topic here, we'll go back to the UFL. Attendance still low for UFL cities outside of St. Louis. The Stallions draw only 12,265 fans in home opener. Could these lackluster numbers affect the league's future beyond this season, Kyle?
Okay, so time out for just a minute. The thing we're complaining about is the 12,000? No. That's
when you think about St. Louis having 40,000, it's a lot. It's a big difference.
This is an anomaly. You don't base it off of that. And to St. Louis's credit, I feel like they've done a better job of every team that's actually than any team. And the only team that might come close is the DC Defenders being smart enough to embrace the bear snake and get that into it. But the UFL overall has failed in individual marketing, right? The part that you need to be worried about, Drew Willingham, is the Michigan Panthers not even getting to 7,000 in their home game, okay? Even a winless Orlando Guardians team, and I say winless because they were 3 weeks in, was able to draw 7 to 10 on a regular clip. That's the part that's concerning. Or maybe we're exposing the USFL like Janet Jackson in a halftime show. I don't know. The punchline's this, though. The focus, if you're expecting more than 10,000 a game for a UFL team at this point, I don't think your expectations are reasonable. The league, or at least the XFL's efforts were always to go national, get the TV rights, get the million viewers, all that kind of thing. And I think rightly so, that's what's going to drive the money more than does the local stuff. I get that they're focusing on that. They're attacking the TV first, and they're relying on social media presence to be a cheaper form of advertising, word of mouth, whatever. That's a reason why they leaned into getting a content creator, as who's a kicker, as kind of the face. It's very unfortunate De La Haye got hurt. That's a problem. As much as I don't like destroying's content, I do think it was a wise move to get that, for lack of a better word, free pub. But no, this has been a problem. I don't know about it as much for the USFL, though I assume it's the same. This has been a problem for both leagues, even before the merger, that they've not done very good local marketing. And to St. Louis's credit, they lean into that a bit. If you've seen their Twitter presence, if you've seen their social media, if you've seen some of the stuff they've done locally, they do it harder than anybody else. So of course they got over 40,000 in there. And I think that's the fault of each. If it's confusing on how these leagues are run and who is responsible for what, whether it's the central leadership or the individual team owners, elements of both. But the ball's getting dropped in a lot of places where that focus isn't there yet. I don't know if it's part of the strategy where they're putting all their resources into getting the national branding out first and then going regional. There's some good reason to do that. I know the XFL in its first year last year, so according to when I talked to Danny Garcia about it, they weren't as focused on those local attendance numbers. They were trying to get the TV numbers right, and they were there. They were excellent for the first year of a league. Even I mean, I know you could call it XFL 3.4 or whatever, but like for that year, for what they were debuting, they did well. Let's pump the brakes a little bit on being worried about 12,000. You're focused on the wrong thing, in my opinion, if that's where you're worried.
Well, I mean, I know that we're looking at this, and I said that the St. Louis team in their 40,000 they're having at their stadium. But yeah, like you bring up a good point. When you have Michigan Panthers playing at Ford Field and they're only getting like 7,000, you know,
not
me, that's what I'm saying. But like you can't even get that. And you're looking around like, yeah, you can get like all the TV right deals you want. But when people are watching at home and seeing this is like the closest thing to pandemic football again, and there's like nobody in the seats, they're going to flip it to something else. Unless you're a diehard football fanatic like you or I mean, I'm going to watch it because I love football. But, you know, not everybody thinks the same way.
Sure. No,
So
I see what you're saying with that. And I'll put it this way. There's an element, in my opinion, there's an element of an over importance put upon, oh, well, it looks weird when there's not a lot of people in the stands. If they're watching the game and the game is shot right, you're not really paying attention to that. If the action's good, that'll take away from that. And I feel like, you know, again, we're only week 3 into this league's incarnation. I think the first mistake they made was waiting till late March to start. That was not a good plan. The XFL got it right last year by coming right off the Super Bowl and giving the junkies what they want. And they lost that, you know. But yeah, that's one of many things I feel like they could be doing better. I'll leave it at that.
I mean, they did make late moves. They didn't announce the merger until December. You know, it's like late in January, early February when they're really starting to get the ball rolling on marketing. So they dropped the ball in a couple ways this year. You know, had they made the merger and announcement, all that stuff, and getting the ball rolling with that 3 to 4 months earlier, and you know, gotten the advertisements a little bit earlier and started the season, like you said, shortly after the Super Bowl, and not delay it as much. I mean, the cool part that we have is we literally have, like, you know, Ike said earlier, and we started the show out with the comment, we literally, once week 1 started of the UFL, we have football throughout the remainder of the year. If you love football and you want to catch it every single week between the UFL and the CFL, then as we're going through that, before that even wraps up, you got the NFL starting out. So looking at all this here, if you're a diehard football fanatic, that part's cool, that we don't go a week without football. But yeah, I agree with you. Had they announced everything a little bit earlier, had they started the season a little bit sooner, I think you'd have a little bit better results. The problem that we have with that, though, is starting it earlier, you're competing more with college basketball. And we saw the way that they schedule games around certain games in the March Madness tournament when the UFL season started in week 1. There were certain games that they had going on that were competing with March Madness as well as WrestleMania. So why would you do that and compete with those two options there, especially when Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, co-owner of the UFL, is competing at WrestleMania? Why would you compete with yourself against yourself, literally, as you're now on the board for the WWE? So your two companies are in the same time slot, as you have a game going against WrestleMania and you also have college basketball going on at the same time. It's kind of tough to schedule around it when you get to that point. Do you start it earlier and compete more with college basketball, or do you start it later? Regardless, they still didn't do a great job in advertising the 2024 season.
Yeah, and that's the big punchline. Now, granted, some of it was due to the lateness of the merger being completed. I think you're right there. I think in a perfect world where they had enough time, they may have done what the XFL did. You mentioned The Rock being on and competing against himself, so to speak. Oh, here's the reason. I'll address that in saying this. You may have one match that competes with one football game, but you're there. Put yourself in position to make a shout out. Oh, here's the thing. I'm the final boss. Can you smell what I'm cooking? It doesn't matter. Whatever. It doesn't matter that we're competing with one game. I'm the Rock and I own the UFL and you can watch the other games. Boom. Done. Okay. So I solved that problem. The air quotes solved. The other thing is too, what I think everybody's forgetting is the XFL competed with NCAA March Madness last year, and the numbers did relatively well. That being said, I don't think they were competing with Caitlin Clark in the hype of women's basketball. That was a bigger threat than anything the men were doing. Nobody watches lately. The numbers have borne out that nobody really watches March Madness, for the men at least, until the Final Four. We'll see what happens with the women now that Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and a lot of other stars are no longer a factor. You know, I know they still got Juju Watkins doing the thing with South Carolina and all that. I hope they're still a thing. I hope we continue to see more women's basketball. And I hope UCF women's basketball gets better in the Big 12 as I cover them for the Black and Gold Banneret. Bing! Boy, that was a shameless plug. But nonetheless, I think that's the one thing they couldn't account for. That was a bigger threat than anything else mentioned. That being said, I know the XFL did fine last year competing with those same things. Granted, again, WrestleMania this year too, being a bigger event, acknowledge me, Cody Rhodes, whatever, you know, so.
Acknowledge me.
There it is for you, Kyle Nash. But no, definitely great things to add to that. And Dante has something to add to that as well. He says ticket prices are too high. It's the same prices as the NBA tickets or college basketball, both men and women, which is another problem. The sports competition in the season timeline.
Wow. So if they're actually charging what an NBA franchise would charge, and I'm not saying you're wrong, Dante, I don't know, but if that's the case, that is, to his credit, that's an absolute mistake.
It's going to be interesting to see how they learn from this and schedule things for the 2025 season. You know,
if they learn from this. And, you know, we've seen tides shift before. I mean, there's a possibility we might not have a 2025 season for the UFL. I don't think so. I think with the amount of, you know, partnerships that they've gotten with advertising and the moves that they made with the merger, I will be willing to bet we'll definitely see a 2025 season out of the UFL. If things continue to trend the way they are in certain ways, we could see that change after next year. But I think that based on the marketing stuff that they've got going on with the sponsorships and, you know, the deals they've put in place for that, I think we'll definitely see them go beyond this season through 2025. And Dante says, keep in mind the location these teams are in. St. Louis has bring back an NFL team statement. We talked about that before. I mean, maybe that's part of the sentiment for the fans, but fans are fans, and fans are fans because fans are fanatics and they don't necessarily deal in facts. You and I both agree St. Louis has run its course as an NFL city. So
it has. I mean, they've had multiple opportunities to showcase a team there. And, you know, even though they're showing some great hype for professional football right now, it doesn't remain consistent there. And if the Battlehawks weren't as good of a team as they've been since they've been in St. Louis, you wouldn't have that fan base either. So
that's an interesting thing to see. I agree.
So if they revert backwards at some point in the near future, we will see that fan base decline. I'm willing to bet my next paycheck on that. So I will put that in there.
Hey. Who's giving them the business?
In our last topic here on the chopping block, Coach Prime will only allow son Shadur Sanders and his wide receiver as well, Travis Hunter, to play for 6 possible teams in the NFL in 2025. He listed the 49ers, the Cowboys, the Commanders, the Ravens, Falcons, all 5 of those teams he used to play for, as well as the Philadelphia Eagles. Do you believe we could see NFL royalty in the Sanders family power play the NFL 2025 draft again, like the Mannings did in 2004?
Yeah, sure. Do I think it's possible to do? Absolutely. Do I think doing this hurts those teams that would draft his son? Absolutely. I think the mistake made here is to do it publicly, Dion. And listen, man, I am loath to tell you how to handle your business in PR because you are excellent at it. You know, I get all this. When you come to Orlando with your Colorado Buffalo to battle the UCF Knights here at FPC Mortgage Stadium, as I will cover for the Black and Gold Banneret, bing! Do not scold me too much. However, what you've done is put those 6 teams in position to be thoroughly exploited in a draft situation and lose extra resources over and above a pick to get your son. Your son has already been seen to suffer playing quarterback when not properly supported with necessary tools. Now, I will grant you, any NFL franchise is going to have his quarterback better protected than your Colorado Buffalo did last year. And I'm not blaming you for that, Dion, because I'm talking to him as if he's actually listening. In case you do, check out Total Football Talk. We're a good time, Dion. But here's the thing, Coach Prime, sorry. Here's the thing. Your son, through no fault of your own, got crushed because of a lack of trench warfare on your squad last year. And I know you were rebuilding the team. It needed to be rebuilt. You improved the franchise just as much as I, the student of the game, said you would. This is a pro Coach Prime space. All right. Who is SWAC if you weigh SWAC? Now, technically you aren't in the SWAC anymore, but still I say that showing you, Coach Prime, that I'm on your side here. That being said, I think this was a negotiating faux pas. And what would you be that offended if your son Shedeur Sanders continued to uplift the Detroit Lions, for example, and got them their first Super Bowl? Okay, I get it. You don't want them in Cleveland, cool. But you know, I mean, what are we doing here? That's just not it's the opposite of ain't nobody care. Too many people care. This was a bad move to do publicly. I'll leave it at that.
It kind of draws comparisons to LeBron speaking out on Bronny's future with basketball to an extent, as far as like a more recent time where the parents are putting their foot in their mouth instead of letting their kid forge their own path. And that's the part that I can at least draw comparisons there. Things are a little bit different today with the coverage of sports, with social media and everything, than it was back in 2004 when the Mannings made their power play for Eli, and then 20 plus years before that when John Elway did it to get out of the plane for the Colts to go to Denver. And the difference here is he spoke up on not only Shedeur, but he spoke up on another player of his that came from Jackson State to Colorado now, and that being the two-way player in Travis Hunter. So he's speaking of him like his own son. The other part is Shiloh is going to be going to the NFL at the same time, and he's not even getting his vocal for Shiloh. So I guess he sees more, promise in Shedeur being a high draft pick than Shiloh, and especially if he plays the way that he has been between Jackson State and now Colorado, Shedeur definitely will be a first-round pick, in my opinion. Especially the way you can see where he's adapted in the levels that he's been playing at.
And consider the position the two players play. That's the reason why I believe Coach Prime's banging the drum for Shedeur more than the other son, right? It is because it's a quarterback. I think that's a big part of it. And say what you will about Sanders being a former DB. He's smart enough to know that a quarterback of that prospect in the coming draft class, by the way, I'm pretty sure the NIL that both Prime and Shedeur are getting is a factor in staying in Colorado. Moreover, I would also add, that the quarterback class this season has rendered, Shedeur didn't want to get into that mix. There's no way he wasn't going to pass up Caleb Williams. He wasn't going to pass up Jalen Daniels. He wasn't going to pass up Bo Nix. I think would be interesting. JJ McCarthy might even get more run than him. Drake May, he's not going to pass up Drake May. The only reason why I think he might pass up Michael Penix is because Michael Penix has gotten the most disrespect of any quarterback in this draft. And so I think that would extend there. See, I'm taking it aside to please something again. It's a talent I have. I think he is wise in that, having waited to this year to come out, should he come out after this season, was a wise move in and of itself. But, and you mentioned Braun campaigning for Bronny. It's one thing to pump up your son. It's another to close doors. And I don't feel like LeBron did that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he closed the door. And even Dante says Prime is pushing it to the limit on how much power he has, and also opening the door on an NFL job or GM. Do you agree with that, or do you think he's going to stay in college when his boys leave?
I mean, I'll put it this way. I don't think the reason why I don't feel like, and Dante, this is not me saying you're wrong. Let me lead with that. I'll lead with this. Him pushing the limits and challenging power is what Dion is there to do, right? Coach Prime is here taking the job that he did at Jackson State and shattering the paradigm that existed at HBCUs was huge. Him getting into a space that is predominantly white and showing success and improving a program as he did as a coach of color is a thing. Again, pushing those limits is what he's trying to do. Heck, I would even wonder if he was somewhat motivated to push one of his sons to play quarterback, to push that paradigm, which granted is a lot further along in being lifted than anything else. You know, there was a day where it used to be believed, ignorantly so, that only white guys could play quarterback, which is obviously ridiculous as it sounds as I say it here. So that part of it, I think he's got that mentality in making this request. I think that's a great point, Dante. Him being a GM for the NFL or a coach, maybe, that's the kind of thing. Let me paint the picture of what NFL job makes the most sense, that I don't think this will actually happen, right? Let's say, there was a team that made the playoffs 2 seasons ago, disappointed again this past season, where people then picked them to pick 13 wins and they only got 9. And then the same team I mentioned disappoints again this year. They have a Super Bowl winning coach that has fallen below expectations for 2 years straight. Should they opt to fire him, then bringing in Coach Prime makes sense to get butts in seats to kind of reinvigorate a franchise. I'm saying a situation like, should the Jacksonville Jaguars struggle this year, were they to fire Coach Peterson? I'm not saying that's happening. Dion coming in behind something like that makes sense, right? You're coming in behind a team that's faced disappointment, but they want to do something to hold a nucleus together where they feel like they got something. You bring in Dion, you kind of stoke the fires, get a players guy in the building. I think that's something. Again, I mentioned the Jags because I know them, because I write for Jaguar Report and do the Duval Dive podcast. Bing! But I think that's such an example that Dion being a coach would happen. Being said, I don't think Dion likes motivating young men. And I think that's the part that's going to keep him in college. Most coaches are leaving college for the pros to stop with the recruiting part. I think that's the part that drives Dion, that helps him push those limits we talked about earlier.
It's going to be interesting to see how things, go from here, for his kids moving to the NFL, not just his own bloodline, but the kids that he has coached, like Travis Hunter. And we'll have to see, we got one more year of college football. We have that guaranteed out of the Sanders family, at least in Colorado. And we'll see how things go after this year. But let's go ahead and take this into the Snowflake of the Week intro and see what Kyle and I have to say about who our Snowflake of the Week is from this past week's action in the UFL.
Total football talk.
Oh, yeah. Get your beanies on. It's time for the Snowflake of the Week. And with that being said, Kyle, out of all the people that played in the UFL this past week, who is your pick for the Snowflake?
Listen, I would love to say that I'm going to drop some fire. It's going to melt the snowflake, but heck, it seems like they've already been melted. The Houston Roughnecks special teams going 3 weeks, 3 blocks, averaging a blocked punt a week is my snowflake. And listen, maybe you're up in Michigan, but that's not the kind of snow you want to see, especially in April. Goodness gracious. If you can't be expected to punt the football away, how are you supposed to handle anything else you're struggling with currently? Listen, head coach CJ Johnson is struggling hard right now, and it's due to surrounding staff. It's actually kind of similar to a situation we saw in Orlando where Coach Terrell Buckley was struggling earlier because his offense wasn't up to snuff. Granted, the special teams being what it is there for the Roughnecks, it's a rough situation. You if you can't punt the ball away, you're just handing points to the other team. Snowflake of the week all day, man.
I like that pick, and with my pick, I was thinking along the lines of the Roughnecks for a minute, but looking at the past couple weeks in the offensive production from the running backs for the Memphis Showboats, the fact that they had 20 rushing yards on 12 attempts. I mean, that's like having Thomas Edward Patrick Brady II as your running back, running your ball all 12 times to get that type of production on 12 rushing attempts. If the Showboats have any chance of finishing the season with a positive record, I've got to say that they have got to step it up with their running game. Yeah, they got a win, but they got 2 losses right now after 3 weeks, and it's not going to pan out for this team if they continue to have the rushing attack that they have, and like they have been showcasing over the past 3 weeks. They need to get it together, and they need to get it together fast if they have any hope of getting anywhere in this 2024 season. And with that being said, let's go ahead and take this into our next segment as we take this into the 2-minute drill. Normally in that case, we would take another commercial break, but our goal with the Total Football Talk is to try to narrow the show down to 2 hours, and I feel like we can do that with the elimination of today's third commercial break. And with that being said, in our 2-minute drill, we're going to go ahead and start it off with this Saturday's 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time contest. Kyle, quickly, Memphis Showboats 1-2 take on the St. Louis Battlehawks, who are 2-1. Who do you think is the victory here?
Oh, man, if you're betting against the Battlehawks on this one, I can't help you with that. The Showboats get sunk. The Battlehawks fly on to victory.
I think we're going to see that as well. I agree with that as well. Battlehawks get the victory on ABC at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, improved to 3-1. Showboats will not advance in victory, but they will go to 1-3. DC Defenders follow that as there are 2 7:00 p.m. Eastern Time games this Saturday, as we have 3 total games this Saturday for the UFL. Both of these games I'm about to say will be at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox, but check your local listings for availability between these 2 games. The first one, DC Defenders 2-1 are traveling to Birmingham in Alabama to take on the undefeated Stallions. Based on what we said earlier, do you think the Stallions will remain undefeated at 4-0?
Oh, get your Ben Gay for this one, because some people are going to be sore after this football game, Drew Willingham. Listen, at the end of the day, it's not that I think the Defenders are a bad team. It's that the Stallions are that good. They're that consistent. They're that well-rounded. The one thing I will knock the DC Defenders for is their consistency on offense. Don't expect this to be a runaway. Don't expect a double-digit differential. Expect a victory for your Birmingham Stallions.
I second that as well. Stallions will improve to 4-0. The DC Defenders will fall to 2-2, but still be in decent shape to make some noise for the remainder of this season. The other Saturday 7 p.m. game on Fox, again, depending on your time availability and local listings, Michigan Panthers, who are also 2-1 like the Defenders, travel to San Antonio, Texas to take on the San Antonio Brahmas, who are 2-1 as well. Between these 2-1 teams, who do you think gets the victory to improve to 3-1, Kyle?
Well, listen, they won't have the benefit of block punt bonanza with the Birmingham Brahmas. Wow, that's a lot of B alliteration right there. And listen, they're colored like bees too. They'll feel the sting of the horns of the Brahmas. The Panthers had a nice little outing, take care of a Roughnecks team that ain't so rough. That's adorable. Come back to earth. Brahmas for the win. I don't care about their quarterback situation. Someone's getting punched in the mouth.
I believe that'll be true as far as someone's getting punched in the mouth. if Jake Bates, the kicker for the Panthers, has anything to say for it, he'll make another 60-plus yard field goal to seal the deal and help them get this victory here. However, I think the Brahmas, with as well-rounded of a team that they are, this loss from this past week, although it wasn't a bad loss, it was a close game. Feel like it might be enough of a smack in the mouth to motivate them to get to this victory this upcoming weekend. I think the Brahmas improved to 3-1 at home, and we will see some good contest in this game, in this matchup. And then moving to our last game, the Arlington Renegades, who are 0-3, travel inside of that state in Texas to Houston to take on the Roughnecks, who are 0-3. This game is on Sunday at 2:00 p.m. Eastern time on FS1. Between these two 0-3 teams, who do you think falls to 0-4, and who do you think is lucky enough to get the victory this Sunday?
Listen, the R on the helmets for the Arlington squad isn't for Renegade, it's for Revival. This is going to be the victory that starts stepping them in the right direction. Hey, listen, if you've been listening to me or any of that part of the show I've been doing the past 2 weeks, I believe in the Arlington Renegades being far more dangerous than the record would show. And the Roughnecks, man, listen, they get even a little less rough as they get further tenderized by the Renegades.
Oh, absolutely. And I think based on what you just said and what you've been saying over the past few weeks about this Arlington Renegades team, they're due for a victory. It's time for them to get the win. I mean, and like you said earlier in the show, the Roughnecks are not the same team that they were when Wade Phillips was coaching them last year. I mean, things have definitely changed dramatically in less than a year since he has been gone away from that team. He's still within the same state, just on a different team, and is definitely paying dividends for the Brahmas, but not for the Roughnecks. I think the Renegades get this victory here, and I think that it's going to be a decisive victory because of the contest they've had over the past few weeks. Like you said, they keep facing the best teams of the UFL right now, and they've been hanging tough with them. They've been losing, but they've been hanging tough, and I feel like the competitiveness of those games is going to help them rout the Roughnecks, because the Roughnecks have not been as competitive as the Renegades in the past few weeks. So to piggyback on what you were saying, I think that all of that culminates in a victory for the Renegades, but not a close one. It's not like it's going to be a 29-28 victory, Defenders over Renegades. It's not like it's going to be the Renegades getting a victory like that. We're going to see a decisive victory this Sunday out of this, toilet bowl, what it looks like for record, but it's really not. So it's going to be for that. And for that, you will be saying next Monday when you see us at our new time, you will be doing this when you look back on this prediction right here for this game.
Acknowledge me.
Acknowledging Kyle, myself, and whoever is on with me next week will be saying the same thing. We're going to be acknowledging that right there. Now, when it comes to the 2-minute drill, those are all the games that we have for this upcoming week. And we've recapped the previous week. We've previewed the upcoming week. But now is that point in the show where we get to the post game.
Total football talk.
As long as it's one. Oh, it's great. I love it. I hope it actually is recording. Listening to it.
And here with the post game, basically out of everything we've talked about in today's episode, Kyle, just anything in football, NFL, UFL, college, even previewing CFL, is there anything that's on your mind that you would like to share with people right now?
Sure, Drew. Listen, it's going to come down to this. We went over. Listen, I waxed poetic about people taking the whole Thomas Edward, Patrick Bieber, Brady thing entirely too seriously already. I'm not going to force you to sit through that. Here's the tip I will give you, folks. When you're looking at the NFL draft, there's going to always be a particular place where the picks go off the rails, okay? This season, the top three teams clearly looking for a quarterback. The Cardinals is where it just might go off the rails. because we know the Chargers are going to pick a receiver at 5 because they got rid of their top 2 guys. I say no, I expect. That's what I'll say. We don't know what the Cardinals are doing, mostly because they're not a very good front office, but we don't know what the Cardinals are doing. We just know they're not getting a quarterback because they have Kyler Murray. Look out for it to go off the rails there, and watch for every team to react thereafter, and expect either O-lineman or wide receiver to go on a run. Whichever one of those goes on a run, your team, if they're picking below pick number 10, hope that they pick the position that hasn't had a run on it. If they get a run on offensive tackles or wide receivers, hope they pick a corner there. Looking at you, Jaguar fans at 17, right? Just mention that because of the Duval dive, and we're heading for the Jaguar report, Drew Willingham. Bing! That being said, there's the wisdom. I think the picks will go off the rails, and assuming Cole Johnson's back next week with the new schedule that starts on the 22nd, which will actually probably be the show where you preview the draft, Drew Willingham. I just wanted to keep the seat nice and warm for you and Cole Johnson to go into the draft there.
Regardless who it is, we'll definitely appreciate the help with that episode next week. Definitely looking forward to the new time. And as Kyle brought it up, again, next Monday on the 22nd, new day, new time for Total Football Talk, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern time. But, Kyle definitely threw some great things out with that one right there. And when you look at some things that have been going on, I want to kind of touch up on something that you had brought up earlier, and that is with Brandon Ayuk potentially, being moved. There's been a lot of hype around that, in the recent time, and especially when you look at the impact that he's made on the 49ers. These rumors, if they're true, it was kind of a thing I wanted to ask you. I was going to say for this part, do you think that this actually takes place? Do you think you're going to see Brandon Ayuk in a different uniform next year?
And that's a tough call. I think it's because it's connected to his compensation and him getting the contract that one should get at this point in their career, a la Deebo Samuel, for example. I think that it has some legs. I'm just as confused by what to think about this as I was Deebo Samuel. To be honest, Drew Willingham, I was surprised when Deebo came back. I was sure he was going to be a New York Jet, for example. I have people here in Jacksonville hoping and praying that they get Brandon Ayuk, which, hey, listen, that would certainly silence a lot of critics for how their offseason's gone so far. That all being said, listen, when it comes down to a player getting his worth or what he thinks his value is, A, I always support it, and B, I think it should always trump, air quotes, team loyalty in this day and age, especially in a world where you don't have guaranteed contracts. So I say all that to say we don't know. We've cited Deebo Samuel, Drew. We've cited Jimmy G. We've cited guys who we were sure were out the door. And lo and behold, the next year still had their jersey red and gold. So I can't help you there beyond that, man. I'll tell you this. The fact that he made it past Monday without getting moved makes it a very intriguing and confusing prospect.
Yeah, it could be compensation, like you were saying, not just for him, but for the team, that if he does get moved, they're looking for the right type of package in order to move him. So I totally get where you're coming from with that. Definitely a great answer on that one. But, just with all the hype that's been coming around that here lately, I figured I would throw that on out there and see what your thoughts were on it.
I will make this statement. If he isn't moved during the draft, I don't think he's moving.
That's a fair assessment, because I was thinking the same thing. It's like, with the draft coming up, if he doesn't get moved by the time the draft, comes and goes, I was thinking the same thing. So you stole the words right out of my mouth when it comes to that. But, again, guys, today, another great episode of Total Football Talk. This was episode 33, as we recapped week 3's action in the UFL, with the Stallions doing their damage over there. And like we talked about earlier with the breaking news and just recently, Total Football Talk will be moving to a new day and new time next Monday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern time. And again, the show will remain live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, and X, formerly known as Twitter, which you can find this show on Sartoga Media as well as on Comey Media platforms. And thank you all for tuning in. A message that I have for you before we get on out of here is for those of you who've been sticking with us through the time change. We started this show out. It was on Tuesdays, but in the afternoon, back when football first started. Had to switch back to the morning time because of my work schedule kind of shifted, and we moved it to Tuesday morning. Well, now we're at a point where Cole's schedule is shifted and also has this opportunity to do a 5-day morning show, and it would unfortunately be going during the time that this show is happening. So to kind of help alleviate the pressures of all that between my schedule that had changed before and his changing now, we came up with that new time. So that is next Monday again, 4/22 from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern time. And we will be covering the Week 4 action of UFL, recapping that. We'll be previewing the Week 5 UFL action. And like Kyle said, because the draft will be literally right around the corner from that point, we'll be talking more about the draft on next week's episode at the new time. Again, said it enough, but I'm going to say it again. 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern time is our show that you have seen before. It was a 3 to 4 hour show, now narrowed down to 2 hours as a result of today. Today you will see this 2-hour show, and it will continue to move forward into next week and beyond to help this life of Total Football Talk continue from episode 34 next week and beyond. But for episode 33, for my man Kyle Nash for taking the time to be here again, thank you as always. And, like Cole says, in life, like in football, during a tackle, keep your head up and to keep going, playing hard till that whistle blows. And like I always say, to all of you out there at the end of each and every show that I do, it can be the In or Out Sports Debate, which will be coming back soon. It can be the D. Willie in the Evening Show. It can be any other show I've ever done in my life before. I've told you this then, and I will tell you this now to everyone. Thank you for taking your time, being real out here in these streams and watching this show and being supportive for me, the brands, and our future. And as always, stay safe out here in these streets. You don't have to go home, but you got to get on up out of here again. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to Total Football Talk. And a final reminder, new time, new day starts next week on the 22nd from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern time in that afternoon. We'll see you then.